You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, this is Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Welcome to the big show, my friends and family. We certainly appreciate you guys here. As always, the Chris Voss Show, the family that loves you, embraces you, non-judgmentally judge you, at least not as harsh as your grandmother-in-law or your mother-in-law or your grandmother-in-law. I'm sure they both hate you. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke, people. I'm sure your people are lovely in your family, but the best family there is to kind of just judge you. Refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. You know the drill, folks. YouTube.com/Chris Voss, Goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places the kids are playing these days. My pleasure to announce we have an amazing guest on the show today. Mitch Hankins is on the show with us. He is a cloud-certified full-stack developer who speaks to professionals struggling to find meaning in their lives. We all need that, don't we? Some meaning might be good. My next meeting is finding a Coke later after the show. He has developed his expertise by working with some of the largest organizations in the U.S., including NASDAQ and the U.S. military. With over a decade of professional experience, Mitch noticed that he and his colleagues often struggled with feelings of isolation. This often led to an unfulfilled life where complacency and loneliness were the norms. Mitch can help anyone who feels disconnected to experience a fuller and more connected life. Mitch, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. I'm doing absolutely wonderful. How are you?
I am doing wonderful, man. I love doing my show. It's the peak of my day every day, and it's wonderful to have you here as well. Give us your .coms so people can find you on those interwebs in the sky.
Absolutely, yeah. So where all the cool kids hang out, they can go to thedebuglife.com. It's my main website. It's where I post my content, such as my blog posts. And then I'm also active on Instagram and TikTok under the handle The Debug Life, and I do all sorts of crazy stuff there. Like we talked a little bit about our love for Huskies and how absolutely psychotically crazy they are. So I post a lot about them, as well as my, I have a very elaborate morning routine that I get into every day, and all sorts of other goodies. So that's where I can be found.
There you go. The big thing I love about Huskies is there's nothing better than waking up in the morning with a mouthful of fur and always be covered in fur. In fact, I usually have to tape myself down, whatever it's called, the little tape roller thing.
Yes.
You usually have to do that before every show, or you leave the house, or you just have to give up wearing black. I just can't win. So welcome to the show.
Yes.
Give us an overview of what we're going to talk about today and what it is you help people with.
Yeah, I would love to. So, what we're going to be talking about really primarily is how there's certain societal expectations, certain expectations in society about what it means to be successful when it comes to, wealth or career-wise. And of course, a lot of these things can be fulfilling from the outside. But what I've come to discover is that even if, you build wealth, even if you have all these things that people envy, you need to be doing it for the right reasons, and you need to know why you're living the life that you're living, or you're just going to be feeling pain. Pain is just your mind telling you like, hey, there's something wrong. And that's something I've really learned in my life. And that's, we can talk about the whole journey of how I came to that conclusion, but that's something that I wanted to teach other people, to say like, hey, I've made this journey. I can help you shorten yours. And primarily what I do is exactly that: coach people and transfer my knowledge in the form of what I've learned, all the books I've read, all the courses I've taken, kind of say like, hey, this is what's worked for me, and it might work for you as well. It might not, but this is what did it for me.
There you go. Experience helps in coaching people. It reminds me of that line from Socrates: the unexamined life is not worth living.
Yes.
I mean, I'm amazed that people can go through life without sitting down and going, maybe I could be better. I'm also amazed that there's some people in life that can go through their whole life and just be in robot mode. So whatever society hands them, they accept. But then again, George Carlin has that famous saying that what is it? You have to realize the average person, or half of the people in this country, are 50% of the people who are below average dumb.
Right.
So maybe we needed some help
Absolutely.
from people like you to make people smarter. I don't know. Joke there.
Well, and I was definitely, I alternate between, being below that 50% bar and above it, right? Some phases of my life have been above it, other times I've been below it. And I would say definitely the things I've learned in life have come through experiences that just really weren't fun. And when you look back on them, it's like, I learned a lot, but when you're in the middle of those experiences, it feels like the end, right?
Yeah. I'm reading a good book by Ryan Holiday today, or it's not today, but for the last little month or so. And he's got some great books, and his one book is called The Obstacle is the Way. And it talks about Stoics and different things where really, we need to address obstacles and problems as, okay, this is the way through. We achieve them, we beat them, we overcome them, we climb over them. Instead of sitting and boo-hooing and going, oh, why is this befalling me? We accept that this is the way of the universe, and we move through.
Absolutely, yeah. I love Ryan Holiday's work, and I actually I use that mental model a lot of the obstacles the way of, I really tend to think if something bad happens to me, I'm almost like, how can I use this to my advantage?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can I use the momentum of whatever is happening to move me in the right direction? And I've really come to the conclusion through a lot of that thinking of that, like, yes, we have a certain amount of control in life, and especially as entrepreneurial types, like we are like very A-type, very like, want to control every single little thing. But there's also that level of acceptance. The Stoics actually have this parable of the dog to the cart. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but essentially, well, it has to do with fate. And the idea is that there's a dog tied to a cart, and as the cart moves along the road, the dog gets dragged along, whether he wants it or not. Like, he can run the other direction, but then he's just going to get dragged. So he can either walk along with the cart and take it in stride, or he can resist it and just get dragged along and hit every bump in the road. And the beauty is if the dog like kind of moves with the cart, he does have some leeway. Like, the leash that he's on does give him a little bit of leeway. And that's kind of how I see obstacles in life. Like, it's really saying like, hey, natural forces are a hell lot bigger than anything, anything a human can do. And these obstacles are really there, I think, to kind of almost send us in the right direction. And then it's up to our imagination to say like, well, how can I use this to go in a direction that I want it to go? And
the thing, I went through a really hard time with my second husky where she had cancer for a year and a half, and we dealt with all sorts of cysts and all sorts of problems, and I was pretty upset and emotional during that time because cancer, it was long drawn out, hospice care and everything else. When my third dog just recently, as I mentioned before, she just had her cyst cut off her leg, and we were dealing with the surgery and everything else. Me being able to advocate for what I learned from my first dog who went through cancer and be able to manage the vet and be able to get proper care without going broke. Because you need to manage the process. Otherwise, if you run out of money, you hit a wall with a dog. So being able to do all that. And so all the hell that I went through with my second dog, my third dog, I was more prepared. And so I felt really blessed that, I'd gone through that first experience to be able to master the second experience more. So, being able to learn things, pass through things, beat things, overcome things, just makes you stronger, better. What's that old line? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. Like, I think that's really the definition of personal growth, where it's almost like you just become a bigger person. Like, if you think back to like, and I always challenge people to do this mental exercise. It's like, think back to the last thing you didn't think you'd be able to do, and then think about going through that again now, and like how different it would be.
Yeah.
And if you cruise like that, like I've had many moments in life like that where it's like, how on earth am I going to make it through this? Like one time I remember I was living in Ocean Beach at the time in San Diego, and I lived right on the cliffs. I could like exit the yard and go surf right in my own yard. I would even like sit at my desk where I would work, and I could see whales and dolphins like in the water, all this just beautiful location. But I was renting, and I thought like, okay, this is a waste of money. Like I'm just paying someone else's mortgage. Like I don't want to do this anymore. And I read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he's like, okay, you got to buy real estate. So at that point in my life, I was like, okay, like my next goal is buying, multifamily property. Like I have to. This is like my goal in life. Like I have to do this. And I couldn't find anywhere in San Diego where I got like the cash flow I wanted, and I didn't feel good about any of the deals. So I kind of started broadening my area. I started like looking in Florida, and eventually ended up in, of all places, in Ohio, because like they had good growth rates and like still good deals. I know, like Columbus. And, I found a deal there, and I made an offer, and it got accepted, and it was a good deal. Eventually the tenants pretty much paid my mortgage and everything. So I lived there for free. But those first few months were really, really tough because, I loved San Diego. I loved the weather. I loved my friends there. And weather. Ohio was, I think, the 7th state that I lived in the United States. It was the 2nd country I lived in. So like, I've been like kind of uprooted and like just, left all my friends and all that for so many times now that by the time I made it to Columbus, I was just kind of burnt out from all that. And then I realized like, okay, I really want to go back to San Diego, and similar to the obstacles the way, I kind of thought like, well, how can I use all this at the time when I, even in hindsight, it sounds ridiculous, but at the time I was just thinking like, what on earth am I going to do? Like I got on my financial goals. I achieved everything I wanted to. I'm living for free, and I'm still just utterly unhappy. Like what on earth am I going to do? And then I decided to use that momentum, like to look at the objects of the way and to be like, okay, like how do I use this to find more meaning in life? And I really got curious about, about what I wanted. And I started, I went into therapy at the time to really talk through these things, because I'm like, well, maybe I can get someone to help me. And it was through that I really discovered like that I wanted a better like community around me. And so that allowed me to really refine a plan for coming back to San Diego within the parameters, like the financial parameters that were acceptable to me. And I made that work. And that was all because I got really curious about a situation that seemed like I wouldn't overcome it at the time.
There you go. I mean, that's things we go in, that's part of the fun of journey. I like trying on new things. I move about every 2 to 3 years. And I'm single with no kids. I mean, 2 huskies, which are kind of like, you add the 2 of them together, they're probably a whole kid. They haven't learned to drive yet, and they won't, or at least not at least I hope they won't learn to drive. They learn to drive
you nuts. That's about it.
They'll if they, how huskies are, when they escape, they're miles away. So if they do learn to drive, the whole world's in trouble. If they learn to drive and shoot, they'll rob banks. I mean, that's how if huskies were going to do anything, I think they'd rob banks. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I'm going with that. Just feels right. From
what
I know,
sounds right.
So they probably they would probably rob PetSmarts. They would probably go in and rob all the treats, hold them up at gunpoint, steal all the treats, and then run away. And
probably
eat them. They'd probably be caught laying around eating 10 bags of treats. So you call your blog The Debug Life. What made you choose that title and kind of the theme for what you're working on?
I love that. I have to admit, I often skip over explaining that because I don't even have a good reason. I say because I don't have a good reason, and there's so much meaning behind it, and I shouldn't be skipping over it. But it's the Debug Life is essentially revolves around the computer paradigm of debugging. You know, bugs are essentially errors in algorithms and computer programs. They are pieces of code that cause erroneous behavior or that cause some sort of malfunction. So what the debug life is all about is taking that analytical algorithmic approach to life and saying like, what are the bugs in my life and how do I resolve them? Because the thing is, like, life is an algorithm. Like everything that we're trying to do, somebody has already done before. Like that's why books are so powerful. That's why podcasts are so powerful, because we can learn from people that have already done what we want to do. So, you know, if there's something wrong in our lives, like we can, like, let's say somebody doesn't have a plan, like we talked about earlier, like somebody doesn't have a proper plan for their life. Like they may not have like a proper vision, or they may not have learned how to properly break out their KPIs, those sorts of things. Then there's a process for all of that to walk people through, for them to get clarity in their lives. And so the debug life is really all about getting curious. You know, as I spoke about earlier with a Columbus story, like not numbing yourself with too much TV or with drugs or overeating or other things, just really getting curious about why you feel certain urges and accepting them and implementing solutions to resolve them over the long term rather than just the short term.
Yeah, it's interesting how people, like I said, they go through this journey of life. They just kind of accept whatever gets told them. What do you do? Go to school. What do you do now? Go to college. What do you do now? Get married. It's a little Fight Club sort of bit that they did there in the bathtub that I've always enjoyed the scene of that. You know, my dad told me, go get a job. And then I said, what now, Dad? He said, go get married. And I said, go get married. And, you know, really questioning what life hands you and the social nature of preformed life that people go, you know, here, you should do this. You know, I grew up in a cult. I was told religion was a certain way, and I was told that there were certain, you know, rules you had to follow. And I was the guy who would always go, but why? Like, why did this guy have to do that to that guy? And like, there's this all-seeing, all-knowing guy, and why is he an asshole? And sometimes, but he seems like he's got a really sadistic, masochistic. I don't know what's going on with him. He needs some help. Evidently, there's no psychiatry in goddom. Like there's only God over, I don't know, Venus area or something that does psychiatry that he can just go see, and maybe we can figure out what's going on with God's mom in his relationship that, you know, fucked him all up, that made him so evil in the First Testament. I don't know, doing a rib, you know, so, you know, and people, you know, they go into life too. I mean, you know, I've met people that they're like, life isn't fair, you know, and it's like, hey man, you clearly didn't get the memo, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and life, I don't think life is fair or unfair. It just is. It just is.
It just is. It's just a grand survival game. It's like Battle Royale. And last one standing at the end wins, assuming there's, you know, it's not quite Battle Royale, but it's almost there, where it's, you know, it's, I mean, you got to beat cancer, you got to beat, you know, all disease, and hopefully you're born into somewhat of a good start. But even if you are, there seems to be maps you can take to get out of it with a little bit of luck and hard work and sweat. You talked about in your bio, I mentioned that you talked about going through isolation and some of the things you saw people dealing in yourself with in isolation. For me, I actually enjoy isolation more because it keeps me away from other people. I, like you, the more I get to know people, the more dogs I acquire. So, but no, do you want to touch a little bit on isolation and issues people have with that, especially over COVID recently?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think isolation is so important. I do think there's a difference between, like, so isolation come in two forms. It can come, I think, in loneliness and solitude. And I think solitude we are short of, like in our hyper connected world of like constant dopamine stimulation, and, you know, everything is just so extravagant and extroverted. Like it's nice to be in solitude, so you can kind of like connect to like your inner self, your inner wisdom, just hear your own thoughts. It's like when you're not around people, middle of nature, you know, obviously with all the green and plants around me, I love nature. Just we all need that space where we're just alone, like whether that's reading a book or whether that's, being up in a cabin somewhere or being on, a skiing trip somewhere, whatever works for someone. We're just being alone to recharge is huge. And introverted people are going to need that more than extroverted people, but anybody needs that. Because I mean, how else are you going to learn like who you are as a person if you're always surrounded by other people? And that's a huge shortage, I think, in our society of solitude, of time spent in solitude.
I don't know. I've seen who I am as a person. I really don't want to know more. I've seen enough. No, but you're right. You're right. I mean, a lot of people don't have any self-awareness knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it's emotional regulation. Like if you can't be alone and you can't be entertained by yourself, then like that's a warning sign. And I speak from experience. Like I wasn't born like knowing how having that self-awareness. Like that's something I had to learn, but it was a tough journey. And now I know how important it is. And that's of course, juxtaposed and compared against loneliness and when you're isolated. And you don't enjoy it, which that is actually extremely unhealthy. Like there's actually studies that have shown that it can literally kill you. Like it can do all sorts of bad stuff to your heart. It can do all sorts of bad stuff to your hormones. It's like this, like chronic isolation poses the same health risk as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Like it's some crazy statistics like that. And, I learned that when I did this road trip from Ohio to California. I just drove. I took, just me, the car, and the dogs. That was it, and just whatever stuff I needed. And it was like 6,000 miles or something. And all I did was just go through all the South and like New Mexico and a couple other places around there. And I would just hike all day pretty much, and work in the morning. And the first few weeks, I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh, I have all this freedom. Like, I love being able to do this. Like, how amazing is it? I can live my life like this. And then I think I was probably like 5 or 6 weeks in at that point. I was like, okay, I've kind of had it now. Like, I've been on the road, like in a car with 2 Huskies for the past 4 or 5 weeks. I haven't seen any friends, like at least in person in the past few weeks. And I decided to just cut the trip short. Like I was still supposed to go up to Nevada and Colorado. And I just went straight to San Diego because I kind of had it. So I think the first few weeks were like the good solitude where I was hiking and I was like really getting to know myself. Like, what do I want in life? Why do I want it? Like, what am I willing to do? Like, what am I willing to work for? Versus the last few weeks, it was just like, I want people around me. Like I'm lonely and this isn't fun.
There you go. Well, if you go to Vegas, there's plenty of people around you. You can go to the casinos and there's.
Yeah. I don't know if that would have been the ideal situation.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, if you ever come back to Vegas, I'll show you where lots of people are. My fortress of solitude. I built my own fortress of solitude. It's my bathroom, actually, when I'm sitting on the throne. Unfortunately, though, my dogs always have to come in and give me that guilt look. That they do. They come in when you're in the bathroom and they're like, hey, you said you can't go bathroom in the house. How come you get to do it and we don't, you hypocrite?
Yeah.
And they give me the evil eye. And I'm just
they just tell them because you don't pick up after me. Like
pretty much, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons we do. I mean, if they'd learn to use the toilet, we'd be fine. But man, they got to go outside.
If only.
I did that with my first 5 kids too. I let them just play in the backyard without diapers, and then once they learned to be potty trained, I let them in the house. Took them a while to crawl in and out of the doggy door, but that's a joke. People, don't get your underwear and panties in a bind. So, what are some other things you're going to feature and help coach people on that we haven't touched on yet?
Yes. So the biggest part we definitely talked about it's the community, getting to know yourself. The biggest thing I coach on is setting your vision for your life. Like, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years from now? Like really describing it in detail. And then what I really specialize in is breaking things down. So one big aspect of it is core values. Like I think having a vision for your life without core values is kind of akin to using a map without a compass. Like it makes such a tremendous difference for me having core values. And I can tell you 100 stories why, but it's important to have them. And then the breaking down part is really like, well, what can I do over the next year to get closer to like the vision I have for my life. And once you've kind of nailed that, it's about like, well, how can I break down the next year into into each individual month to get closer to that 1 year goal. And then it's breaking down that month to weekly goals, and then those weekly goals to daily goals. That is really how I've experienced a lot of success in my life, and how I see a lot of people experiencing success is breaking things down to make it manageable into the smallest chunks possible, and really focusing on the things that matter instead of trying to focus on everything at once. And as well as community building. So a huge part I coach on is becoming comfortable with who you are as a person, not succumbing to society's pressure. Like, to me, being a man is about being truly true to yourself. Like, it's not about what society tells you what a man is. It's not about like, oh, you don't cry or you don't do this. It's just literally being true to yourself. And that can be the most, what other people would think is not masculine at all. Like, it's just being true to yourself. And so a big thing for me is finding that and working people through who that is, and being true to that, and finding the people that support that. So having a community around you of people who draw that out in you and who really support you. Because I think a lot of people just as you alluded to earlier, kind of take things not necessarily for granted, but are kind of like, okay, these are the cards I've dealt in life, and they don't want to really, rock the boat too much, versus where my coaching is all about like, no, screw that. Like, you can have the life you want. You can have the life you deserve. You just need to have the courage to stand up for it and to demand it really from life.
That's poetic. That's beautiful. People need to question what's going on with their life. It's why do we do this? Why do we do it this way? Why does everybody march in the same direction as sheep? One thing you talk about on your website is alcohol and tobacco consumption on your Instagram. I noticed you got to never try alcohol and tobacco. That was kind of interesting. You alluded earlier that, healthy diet and avoiding some of these things. Let's talk about that a little bit, because that's a good tip.
Yeah. So, I think any drugs, you really have to be, it's such an extremely fine line between numbing yourself and just kind of having a good time. And when it comes to alcohol and tobacco, they're just so socially accepted that nobody really bats an eye when you do it. Personally, I haven't gotten drunk, and I couldn't even tell you the last time. Again, this is something kind of from personal experience, because I struggled with alcohol abuse when I was like 13 or 14 years old. Like, I went through a couple of rough patches in life, right? So again, this is something that I speak from my experience. Later on in my life, in my mid 20s, it was more with weed. And so I learned these things from experience. Like, it's okay to do certain things if they're working for you and you're still achieving your goals, but the line is very, very easily crossed. And so, tobacco, alcohol, weed, all these different things, even like, consuming fast food or a great deal of TV. Like, if you're watching more than 1 or 2 hours TV a day, like, that's usually kind of an indicator. Like, these are all things that we do to numb ourselves. And that sounds a little silly, but, I would tell people, like, next time you have an urge to smoke or to drink or to watch a great deal of TV, like, kind of go within and ask yourself why. Like, why do you want to do that? And is it a healthy impulse? Is it because it'll be good for you, or is it because you're trying to avoid something? And the more you get curious about that, the more obvious the answers will become. And I think the more empowered you will be to take charge of something like that.
Yeah, we had an author on a long time ago. I can't pull them up on my website really off the top of my head, but he talked about, why we go to those different disengagements like TV and alcohol, or, sugar's another one. You mentioned food. Some people go eat a bunch of candy and all that good stuff, which is, Friday nights for me. Questioning what that impulse is as to why are we trying to distract? Because it's a thing where we're trying to distract ourselves from whatever we don't maybe want to deal with. I've been known to sit here and I'm working away and I'm like, it's kind of boring whenever I'm doing. And I'm like, hey, I would like to go give me a burger and fries and a shake. And you're like, oh, it's not the best for you, Chris, because I'm wearing most of the burgers and fries from my life and I don't need to add more. And so, you're like, hey, you should go to the fridge. You got salad you can make in there. You got all the salad parts. You go do that. And, and stuff like that. I mean, I don't drink alcohol anymore. One of the biggest things I really realized with alcohol was the real poisoning it does to you, and the dehydration does to your system and damage, but also the effect it was having on my testosterone. A lot of people don't realize that alcohol will lower your testosterone. If you're a man, especially an older man where, our testosterone starts declining, it's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
And it increases estrogen.
Yeah. And my problem with alcohol is I 2 or 3 hours of fun on a Friday night or Saturday night. And I started to get to a point where when I started listening to my body and I started eating better, my body started showing me that, hey, this dehydration and this water retention, all this problems that come from it lasts up to 3 days. I mean, I started getting to the point where I noticed that I was dragging for 3 days. And finally, it just became a zero-sum game where I'm just like, okay, 2 hours of fun, pounding back some vodka and, tuning out, playing video games or something on Friday night just equals 3 days of pain, sometimes a hangover the next morning. When the older you get, the less fun it gets. Like when you're 50, you have 2 beers and you have a hangover. It's not fun at all. So, but you want to take care of yourself, because I can tell you now, I'm 55 now and I'm starting to really feel all the shit I've done to myself. And it's unfortunately my health is in really good condition. But other than that, I mean, I can tell that, there's a bit of wear on the tires. So, I tell my younger friends, I'm like, 2 things, don't drink, don't smoke, and don't get old. They just look at me like, how's that going to work? I don't know. That's your problem, not mine.
Or get old as healthy as you can.
Yeah, I mean, we're still sacrificing virgins of the Black Coven to see if we can find the fountain of youth, but it hasn't worked so far. But we're working on it. So
one day.
The problem is we're running out of virgins. Evidently, it's getting harder to find. That's another matter for another show, I suppose. I don't know what that means. But anything more we want to touch on before we go out?
Well, I think we managed to touch on everything pretty well. If I'm what I'm going to be doing soon is launching a life challenge on Instagram and TikTok. And what I'll be doing is just kind of talking about all the things that I've learned in life, kind of exactly I've been doing during this episode. And there will be a challenge that's associated with it, like a specific behavior actual people can take to just create a meaningful change in their life. And then I will also be launching my coaching program online within the next few weeks. So if people want to keep up with those developments, they can either go on Instagram or TikTok. And my handle there is the Debug Life. And again, the website is thedebuglife.com. That's where the actual blogs and the videos and such get uploaded.
There you go. So we've got the .coms taken care of. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all your data with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
It was awesome. Do you want to plug I was looking through some of your videos on the Debug Life channel on YouTube. You want to plug that as well?
Yeah, so essentially what I do is when I upload my blogs on the Debug Life, there's always like a video attached to them, and I put that on YouTube. So same thing, you can go on YouTube and find the Debug Life there, and it's going to be videos and anything from like, nutrition to exercising to solitude versus loneliness, and a lot of things like how it affects our health as well, like how does social media affect our health, how does technology affect our health. So just kind of anything in that sphere, I'll have videos on YouTube as well.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, Mitch, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks, Monis, for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. See the big LinkedIn group, 130,000 people over there. LinkedIn newsletter is like still blowing up, so check that out as well. Sign up for it and subscribe to it. In fact, they just opened on LinkedIn to where all the newsletters now are open to the public. Like you don't have to be connected to see mine. And so it's starting to really explode and move because people are now seeing all the content. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time. That should have us up, Mitch.